tale as old as time.
Mr. Freeze was
sublime.
So,
sorry, listeners.
Nerdy, unqualified, and probably indistinguishable from rambling. Welcome to the A&D Show.
Hello and welcome to the A&D Show. I'm David.
I'm Austin.
And we are so excited to be back with you again. It's been a long couple of weeks, and we are ready to chat with you once again about all of the nerdiest things in the whole world. And we've got quite a doozy of an episode for you guys. But before we get there, I just thought I would say, give a quick shout out. Our friends over at Here's the Deal, and another podcast that we're friends with their hosts. They are starting back up with their season 2 premiere, which has dropped today. So go on over there, take a listen to their show, leave them a review, and let them know we sent you. They're great guys. They do a great show and a great service to humanity.
Very, very funny.
Also, before we get into our episode, I just wanted to make a quick shout out. We do now have a website. Austin, did you know that we have a website?
I was fully aware, yes.
AANDDSHOW.com.
AandDshow.com
is our website where you can find all of our podcast episodes, all of our latest YouTube video links, and a couple of short little bios and some really cool visuals for you guys to check out over there. So go over to our website, take a listen to any of our content, and you know what? Just show us some love. Show us some love. And on that note, before we get into our podcast really deep, I would like to throw a quick word to our sponsors, one of which gave us that website. The A&D Show is brought to you by Wix.com. Austin, Wix is a supporter of our podcast. They have been for a few weeks now, and the thing that they specialize in is websites.
Really?
Obviously. Yeah, surprisingly. I know, right? Who knew?
Tell me more.
Wix.com is actually a really cool website. What they do is they specialize in hosting, website hosting, and website development. What's cool about them is that you can actually host get your domain name, host your website, and develop it with their online development tools really easily and very cost effectively. In fact, you can actually start your website for free. And what's even better is that you're getting a world-class, nice-looking website. You get it for free. You can try it out as long as you want to, and then whenever you're ready to pay the money to have it in your own domain name, all you got to do is cough up like $15 a month or something like that for the base package. Not a bad deal.
Hey, do we have a website on Wix.com?
Didn't realize that this was going to be one of those like old 50s style soap commercials.
Hey. We do have
a
Let's
website.
go down to the soda fountain.
We do have a website.
Play some jacks.
I actually built our website through Wix.com when they started sponsoring us. And let me tell you, actually, it was pretty cool because we developed the whole site. What I did was I went into their actual catalog of pre-developed, professionally created templates. I picked one that I thought was cool. I added it to my site, and then I went through and I just dragged and dropped my content for our page in there, and literally inside of an hour, I had a fully functional, nice-looking, responsive website. For those of you that don't know, a responsive website means that it will automatically scale from mobile browsers on your phone or your tablets all the way up to your regular desktop browsers on your laptops and your desktop PCs or MacBooks or Mac computers or whatever the difference is.
Yes.
You guys can suss that out for yourselves. But that being said, you can get started with your website today. Do you have a podcast? Do you have a store that you want to promote, some products that you want to sell? Or maybe you're just a fledgling artist, or maybe you're somebody who's wanting to put yourself out to the public to be a public speaker, to be an artist, to be a musician, to be a producer, anything that you want to do. If you need a website, Wix.com is your place to do it. You can start for free, and it'll take you no time at all. It's very intuitive. All the tools are there that you need, and it's a great website. Start for free, and let them know that we sent you, and they might give you a discount. I don't know. Who knows?
So they're good people.
They're good people. Good people. So shout out to Wix.com for sponsoring us. And now, back to the podcast.
Thanks, Vix.
And we're back. And boy, do we have a crazy episode to get to today. In fact, Austin, if you recall, we were discussing just a few minutes ago that we actually had a totally different topic planned for this episode.
Yeah, this wasn't what we were going to talk about today.
And then it was just such an organic conversation, and it was so much intrigue.
Right. And I told David, I'm like, stop. We got to say this for the show. This has got to be our show tonight because I've got fresh thoughts on. So here's the story. So this week I started watching The Punisher on Netflix.
Yeah.
Now I was always like I loved the movie with Thomas Jane, not Warzone. That doesn't count.
Yeah, that one wasn't great.
The Punisher that had Thomas Jane and John Travolta. John Travolta was in that movie as well.
Yeah, and he wasn't a great villain, but Thomas Jane did so good.
So good. I always thought that was such a good movie. And so, I was looking at it the other day. I was eating lunch. I'm like, I want to watch something. So, a guy I work with at The Punisher is a really good show. So I started watching it, and I was instantly hooked. And so I've got these now all these thoughts in my head about origin stories and about TV shows versus movies, and I've got a lot of thoughts on origin stories and talking about superhero TV shows and
right.
what works, what doesn't work, what's good, what's bad, and see where it takes us.
And that kind of sparked this conversation that we almost had before we recorded it. And like you said, we had to stop ourselves and say, save it for the podcast, because it was a very organic conversation that happened. And so what we're going to do, what we thought we would do tonight, we had an episode planned for this today, whatever time of day you're listening to this. We had a plan for the episode for today that we were going to do. We're going to still do that, but we're just going to push it off. And that one we're excited about too,
right?
Because it's automotive technology and where that is going to go. So
that'll be in 2 weeks.
Tune in a couple of weeks. We're going to have that episode anyway. But today we thought this was just such a great timing and such a great topic. We thought that we would just kind of dive down the rabbit hole with you guys into the depths of origin stories across multiple platforms, whether they be video game, whether they be television, whether they be movies, whatever the case may be. Origin stories are no foreign thing to anybody who loves a good story. There's always something that leads up to it. For example, you've got the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The origin story for that is The Hobbit.
Right.
That was made into its own trilogy.
Still haven't seen it.
You've got your you got your Indiana Jones stories. Almost all of those are origin stories for each other.
Right.
And then they have the Young Indiana Jones television series. That was the origin story for that character.
Bad origin story.
It was a trash show, depending on who you ask. But
an origin story nonetheless.
Yes, but
which is how I feel about Gotham.
Right.
Because like Batman's my favorite superhero. Like I love Batman. Like I've always thought that story, and I think that's why I like The Punisher so much, is because I like that dark,
that gritty everyman kind of thing.
Right, because Batman, granted he's a billionaire, so that helps. But it was never about having powers. It was just this guy that had this immense, deep-seated pain, and he was trying to overcome it. And he was overcoming it by curing the world of dangerous people. So, I used to be a fan of the show Gotham. And I liked a lot of what they did until about the last 2 or 3 years. Like, I was one of those where I'd watch it religiously. I watch it online. I'd watch all the episodes. And
unlike your grandfather.
Oh my gosh.
In-law.
Man.
Which is hilarious to me.
Hey, have you seen that Gotham show? Something you would like.
Have you seen the latest episode of Gotham?
Like, no, Grandpa, I've not seen Gotham. So, and I used to love it. That was great. But my problem with the origin story ideology in general is when you take liberty with canon.
Right.
For those that know, canon is storyline. Canon is that accepted as truth,
right,
in the storyline,
like the unbreakable threads that hold the story together.
Right,
as what canon is.
Like Star Wars canon, you will get stabbed in an alleyway if you break canon for Star Wars. Just for the record.
And
with the fanboys.
Now, there are examples of when canon was undone, or at least was sidestepped for an alternate reality or an alternate parallel storyline. A perfect example of that, when it did work, was the new Star Trek trilogy that came out. In many ways, superior to the original in action and in production value. But and
really in following
story.
because
Right, because
the old Star Trek movies were very niche,
to a
and
very
these new ones
specific
were
audience.
done so well,
that they were
really,
appealing to the masses more.
But I think you see that with a lot of what I would call "quote unquote" nerd culture, which I always tell my class at church that I was a nerd before it was cool, so I'm pretty proud of that.
Yes,
but nowadays, that nerd culture is what people enjoy. And that probably started with like The Matrix. Like The Matrix was the first like nerdy movie that I can remember.
The people
that was
really got
huge.
into the culture of it. Yeah.
But like when you have when you take liberty with canon, my issue with Gotham has always been like some of the the character storylines, like Victor Freeze becoming Mr. Freeze, how that happened. It just really bugs me.
Yeah.
The Riddler, how he became the Riddler, or how the Penguin became the Penguin. I don't like a lot of the liberties they've taken with Gotham, and it kind of grew old on me really quick.
Yeah.
And it was it's the same way that I feel about like I used to enjoy the show Supernatural.
Yeah.
But it was literally ended up being like the same thing every single week.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Very
no,
episodic.
somebody dies. Oh no, they're still alive, and it's like they're like somebody. I bet it gets out of. It's just the same thing over and over and over. And we were talking earlier about, do you prefer something to be episodic, or do you prefer it to be a season-long arc?
Yeah, and here's the thing with me, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, not at length, saving it for the podcast, but my deal is the older I get, the more I find that I enjoy the episodic nature of things, and it's not necessarily because I don't like an
Law and
arc.
Order.
Not a great fan of that show, but it's not because I don't like a nice, well-developed arcing storyline, but it's because of convenience and laziness, really, because I don't necessarily want to have to invest for 10 to 27 episodes to really get the full story. I want to be able to get a well-rounded story every week if I decide to watch it that way, or every episode. But I'm also, at the same time, I do like the idea of plot threads that continue. For example, here's a perfect example of a show that was great week to week, but also had this overarching narrative that really set it up. This is actually going to surprise you. This is way out of left field. That
I was thinking Chuck, but go ahead, continue.
Chuck is a good one, but what I'm actually thinking of is Mystery Incorporated. It's an animated Scooby-Doo kids cartoon, but every episode is. I mean, it was actually pretty intense too. It was very good. But what was cool about it was just like every other Scooby-Doo cartoon, which I'm a huge fan of Scooby-Doo. It was just like every other Scooby-Doo cartoon, where it's like you have this mystery, they solve it, and by the end, they're pulling a mask off of a dude, and he's like, well, if it wasn't for these meddling kids, I would have got away with it. That kind of stereotypical episodic story, but at the same time, there were elements of it that were arcing, and they actually had this parallel thread that went through all, 15 or 20 episodes per season, and I like that, but I don't necessarily like the idea of, for example, here's another good example of what I don't like. And I did get into it, and I did go almost the entire series before I gave up on it, and that was Lost. Lost was a massive pop culture phenomenon whenever it came out.
Right.
It was huge, had a massive following.
I wanted to like Lost.
It was incredible.
And I got in too late.
Yeah, you had to start at the beginning, but it was incredibly well written, well performed. It had all this mystery and intrigue, and there was all this huge cultural following behind it, trying to like suss out like what was actually happening, what if they were seeing what they were seeing, whether it was real or not, and all this other stuff. And I was in. I was totally in. I loved every minute of it.
Right.
The problem was that what ended up happening, and this may not necessarily have been, this probably wasn't what killed it for me, but what ended up happening was I caught up to everything, and I was watching them as they released, and my life got too busy, and I couldn't pick up where I left off. But now I don't remember what was happening or where I ended up leaving off, what episode in the 5th season that I stopped watching or whatever. And so if I were to go back, I wouldn't know where to begin, and I'd have to start all over again. And I'd have to start all over again at the bottom, the episode one of like 180 episodes, and I'm not ready to commit myself to an hour-long episode 180 times in a row. And that's where my episodic storytelling thing
and I don't
comes
blame
in.
you on that. But I mean, to me, it's like I'll watch like an episode or maybe part of an episode over lunch.
Yeah.
Or I always joke about when I go to bed, because when I go to bed, I go to bed when my child goes to bed and my wife goes to bed.
We've cracked jokes about that before.
Yeah, it's there's a comedian that says it's like Wrecker's Island, where it's just like, oh, lights out at 8, all right, So I lay in bed and I watch Netflix. That's my time to watch Netflix. But I've always said that for me, it's hard to beat a good TV show. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like a good movie, but it's 2 hours and it's over.
Yeah,
typically 2 hours and it's over,
and it takes a long time to produce that out. So you're talking, for example, I'm a big fan of the Maze Runner series. Mm-hmm. Those are all 3 great films, and I just finished reading the first book. Quick plug, also a very good book. Give it a read. Listeners, not you. I don't know. You don't know how to read. Anyway, but no, the Maze Runner trilogy was a great film series based off of a great book series.
Right.
But it took them 10 years to finish all 3 movies just because of various production halts, and one of the actors ended up getting almost mortally wounded, and different things like that happened that kind of halted production. So that I get that. I get the desire for a TV show because of its a lot quicker production, and with modern technology, they're becoming closer to movie quality production.
Right.
But they're quicker release. They are there's more content to go through. I mean, a single series of a TV show is going to be anywhere from 10 to 24 episodes, depending on depending on what show. It could be as little as 8 or as many as 27. But, anywhere from 8 to 27 episodes, and you're looking at almost 10 times as much story and acting and visual masterpiece as you would get from a movie. So I get that. I do, for real.
I always laugh about being a kid when I found out what a season finale was, and I couldn't figure out, like when I was like younger, like watching the show, like I watched like The Adventures of Lois and Clark.
Yeah,
not Lewis, like Lois and Clark.
Lois and Clark,
and I'd be like, well, this was on. I've already seen this episode. And I didn't comprehend how that worked, but By
the way, Lois and Clark, one of our listeners' favorite TV shows of all time, Kristen.
Is it
she
really?
told me the other day, I was talking to her, and she told me that she's a huge fan of Lois and Clark.
So I think about right now, some of the biggest shows right now are superhero-esque shows, or some of the shows that are built up to be the biggest. I think about when Supergirl came out, that was a huge initial that's kind of died off, but that was pushed to be a very big, huge success. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I'd never seen, but people say it's a very, very well done show.
I've seen a few episodes. The production quality is good, but again, it suffers from in my opinion, the woes of every television show, which is slow pacing.
Right.
Because you have so much more time to invest in it as a producer, you end up being really laborious, which is one of my biggest qualms. You end up being really laborious with the actual details.
But that's also why the shows like on Netflix work so well,
right?
Because they're typically 13 or less episodes. You've got Daredevil, which you say is amazing. You've got Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, The Defenders, The Punisher.
And several others that are outside of that Marvel universe. Right. For example, Stranger Things, which is a massive pop culture phenomenon
huge.
Which they're getting close
July,
to release.
Right? July?
Yeah, I think it's either June or July. They're releasing season 3.
July, yeah.
Super pumped about it. We're going to have a watch party.
Yeah, we are. But like I said, that's these shows on Netflix are so big right now because you can make them very, very good quality.
Yeah.
And they're shorter seasons, and so you get that feel. You get the high production value, and you get Netflix is just giving out money left and right. They're giving away money they don't have right now for show rights and to make products. The only thing, my biggest knock on Netflix, and this is off topic, is their movies are garbage. I don't know that I've seen a movie Netflix has done.
Yeah.
That it was great. Bird Box was not a good movie.
Well, here's the thing with Netflix that plagues them when it comes to any of their original content. And this is a little bit of a sidestep from our topic. But their movies and their shows are almost always super high production value.
Right.
And you can't complain about
Bright.
the visual.
Like how much did it cost to make Bright? Do you remember Bright?
Yeah.
With Will Smith.
I actually kind of liked it, but
I thought parts of it. It was good. It kept my attention, but I fell asleep one night. Like I watched part of it, and I
the
didn't
production
finish it
value,
since.
like I said, the production value was excellent. The acting and the actors that they hired for the film, very, very good. It's their writing that suffers because Bright was an excellent story, except that they just didn't resolve anything. Like it built up and it built up and it built up, and then you're like, okay, and then it was over, right? And that's kind of the thing that plagues them. Beyond that, they also feel because they're a subscription service and they can get away with whatever they want. They also feel like they have to fill every original material that they do with as much profanity and as much explicit content as they possibly can, which not all of them suffer from that. Like the Troll Hunters animated series that they did was actually really, really, really good, except that they had to replace the actor for season 2 because he died. But it was a great show, and that one didn't nearly the inappropriate content, but they tend to have struggles with that.
They do, and I'm people that know me know that I'm pretty conservative. I will caution to say that yes, The Punisher does have some language issues.
Yes,
it's a little. Some of the scenes can be a little bit gruesome. But it's true to story, and that's one thing that I think that for me, I guess when I look at superhero stuff, I always look at the comic books, and I was a big comic book guy.
Look to the source material,
and the source material was not this PG, bright and cheery kind of world. I mean, it was rough.
Yeah,
especially the
thing.
Punisher, and if you've read any of Frank Miller's Batman stuff,
yeah.
I mean, you
pretty
talk
much
about
anything
dark.
Frank Miller is going to be dark,
right?
But
I mean, a lot of the Batman storylines were dark. They were never, they were, I've got posters in my garage, in my office that are. Oh, sorry, tell my daughter good night. Night, sweetheart. I've got,
we're going to leave that in.
No, you're good. I've got this poster in my garage. It's a framed poster that it's not. It was my old office at my old house, but it's an old Batman comic book cover with the Joker on there.
Yeah,
and even then it was from the 80s.
Yeah,
and even that one was dark and grisly.
Right.
So the source material was never bright and shiny. It was always dark. And that's why I think Netflix is a great place for something like The Punisher, something like Daredevil, where these storylines were gritty.
Yeah, and they can make them that way without any kind of restrictions.
Because The Punisher was really it was that came out what 2003 the movie,
the original.
Yeah,
I think it might have been earlier than that. It might have been 2001.
I'm gonna look it up while we're talking. But I sit there and. Oh man, it was 2004, I think. I sit there.
That sounds right.
2004. So that came out in 2004, and the reviews were terrible. It got 29% Rotten Tomatoes, 2 out of 4 stars from Roger Ebert. But
who cares about Ebert?
According to this, Google users 90% like this movie. The Punisher was good.
It was great.
There weren't a lot of superhero movies coming out in 2004. There weren't a ton. I think that was kind of at the beginning of. Hey, this could work.
That was right in the midst of the massive successes of the first original X-Men trilogy.
Right.
Right at that time period, and it was just before they started working on the MCU.
Right.
Because it wasn't the Punisher's Marvel, right?
Yes.
And X-Men are also Marvel, and that was Punisher one of those properties that they had sold off.
But X-Men was owned by Sony, right? Didn't Sony have that? Well, Fox had it. Fox had it. You're right.
Sony has Spider-Man.
But like I said, so you've got this movie. This was really like it was the first one that was really big.
Yeah,
that I think was a commercial success. Granted, John Travolta's character wasn't great. But
that was probably the reason why it didn't get as good a reviews.
It had Big Daddy Diesel, Kevin Nash. For those that didn't watch '90s pro wrestling, was in it. He was the I don't know the striped shirt. I don't know what the right terminology is for that guy. But The Punisher was the first kind of gritty superhero movie. It was always kind of fun, and the X-Men movies were great. I liked all the X-Men movies. I've not seen a bad one yet.
I did think it was interesting, and I don't know if you caught this, but hold on, let me pull this up for a second. The actress, there was an actress that carried over in the Marvel universe between two separate plot threads that I don't think anybody realized this, but it was Rebecca Romijn. Also, she played Joan in The Punisher. She was also Mystique in the X-Men, all three of them.
Rebecca Romijn, when I saw her before I was, of course, with my wife, married to my wife, she was the runner-up. Now, The Punisher...
and moving on.
and you know, I'm fully aware of The Punisher that came out in 89. I understand that.
There was one in 89.
There was. It was Dolph Lundgren was The Punisher back in the day. Yeah. It doesn't really count. It really doesn't count because there was also a Captain America movie back then and it was garbage.
That's also fair with his little wings on his helmet.
But the question is when it comes to the question posed at the beginning of the episode was when it comes to an origin story.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you look for? Do you look for the movie origin story, or do you look for the series episodic where it can be spaced out and it can be told longer?
So there's a couple of things that I want to point out here when it comes to the dichotomy between a film origin story versus a television series origin story, and I'll draw a couple of parallels here because I think this is important to note. First of all, you've got let's just take a look at the origin story of Batman. Right, we've had over the last 2 decades, right?
Don't get me started.
We've had at least 4 iterations of Batman's or Bruce Wayne's origin story, right? Let's make that. Let's just say 4 because I'm not 100% sure on the number we had in the movies, but it's almost every single movie where they switch an actor. They have to. Whatever the director is thinking, he has to redo that origin story like we've forgotten.
Right.
And they waste a 10-minute block of the movie on a storyline that we already know, and they're not expounding on it. They're not doing anything different. They're just reiterating it and showing a different little kid being traumatized by a different character. Right. And then you've got and usually it's about a 5 or 10 minute block. Sometimes, like I think it was the Batman v Superman. They actually showed it in kind of snippets throughout the movie, so it was kind of broken up,
right?
Which was a little bit more of a creative way of bringing that through. But again, we already knew the story; we didn't really need that. And then you look at the contrast to that, the complete opposite end of that, from Gotham. Gotham is almost exclusively an origin story about Batman. In fact, the entire series is currently culminating at what? Season 5? Season 5. It's culminating at Batman finally taking place. But 5 seasons in, and now he's just now become Batman.
But that's the problem with the origin story, though, is because in Batman Begins, you see the origin story as Bruce Wayne in his, late 20s, early 30s?
Yeah, well, there's lots of anachronisms when it comes to...
You see in the 89 Batman... You see Batman becoming Batman again, 20s or 30s probably, with Bruce Wayne. In this, I'm to believe that a 15-year-old kid is going
around gallivanting around as a
and that's my issue with the show. That was my issue all along, was that this is an origin story of Gotham, and you're going to have Batman make his appearance, but it's like you can't realistically have a situation where any reasonable viewer is going to be like, oh yeah, I believe that kid could kick some booty. Not going to happen.
The issue that I take with it, and I'm going to draw another parallel out that's a similar problem. The issue that I take with it, the primary issue, is the pacing, right? The pacing of the origin stories that we have seen, it's quick enough because we already know it from the comics or we already know it from the lore. But whenever you look at the pacing of the film version of the origin story, you've got his entire origin story from basically he's this little innocent kid and he's walking down the street with his parents, and then all of a sudden somebody pops around the corner and shoots them both in front of him. And for whatever reason, they left him alive, which was foolish. Everybody that has any idea about criminal rules, you don't leave anybody behind that can ID you. Stupid. Anyway. But they show that whole thing, and they show it in a couple of minutes or maybe 10 at the most. But the problem that I have with the television iteration, beyond the severe anachronisms between the characters' development and the liberties that are taken with other characters and their backstories, the problem I have is the pacing. Because, for example, just like I mentioned just a second ago, you've got the Gotham narrative, the storyline. It's taken 5 whole seasons of 20 episodes per season?
Probably.
100 episodes. You're talking 100 hours of content, of storytelling, just to get you to the point where Batman is a character.
Right.
And that's frustrating.
Right.
Another example of that, moving away from Batman, Superman. Right? We've seen Superman's origin story, at least 3 times on film.
Right.
You've got the Christopher Reeve's origin story. You've got the Man of Steel origin story. You've got the Superman Returns origin story with Brandon.
Roth. Brandon Roth. Was it Brandon Roth?
Brennan.
Right. You're
Ralph. R-O-U-T-H. Yeah.
Ralph,
Brandon
yeah.
Ralph. And I think
that was garbage.
I actually really liked it, but
I
that's a totally different topic.
I remember watching that. I was sitting there in the theater, and I had to go to the bathroom. When did that come out? What, like 06?
Yeah, I think so.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was sitting there watching it, and like I had to go to the bathroom so bad. And I'm like, if I get up, it might get good.
And it
I don't want to get it. It never got good.
Yeah.
Wasn't Kevin Spacey Lex
Kevin
Luthor?
Spacey was Lex Luthor. The
Yeah,
guy,
better than
Brennan
Jesse
Routh,
Eisenberg.
Brennan Routh was a great Superman Clark Kent. Kevin Spacey was a great Lex Luthor. It was just the writing and the fact that they were trying to piggyback that off of the Christopher Reeve storyline.
So bad.
It was just a bad decision.
So bad.
But so you're looking at 3 individual storytellers, 3 individual different tellings of the same origin story. None of them were more than about 5 minutes, right?
Right.
In fact, in Man of Steel, again, Zack Snyder decided it would be a better option to break the origin story up into multiple flashbacks throughout the first half of the movie.
That's like Zack Snyder's key. Like,
Yeah, that's
Michael
his
Bay blows things
calling
up.
card.
Zack Snyder breaks up origin stories and
into
places with the
flashbacks.
movies.
Well, then you've got the 2006, I think it was, whenever it started, television series Smallville, which was an extended, and it's super long, extended origin story of Superman. Going through his high school years, through his college years, when he gets his job at the Daily Planet, as he learns all of his abilities. And the problem that I always had with that series, I enjoyed it. I did watch it all the way through season 7, but it went 9 seasons, and he never wore the cape. 9 seasons, they never called him Superman. 9 seasons, he never even flew. He only ever used laser vision twice in the 9th season.
Right.
And we're talking 24 episodes. This is back in the day when a full season docket was 24 episodes. So we're talking about 24 times 9. Let me do a quick calculation for you because I want you to know just how much that was. 24 times 9 seasons. We're talking 216 episodes times 45 minutes equals 9,720 minutes divided by the number of minutes in an hour, 162 hours of backstory that took that long for him to even get to the point where he could even be Superman.
Exactly.
And I'm just thinking about it, and I'm just like, that's too much.
No, exactly.
That's taken a 5 minute window that movies have overproduced and overdone time and time again, and just blowing it way out of proportion. And that's my main qualm with it just seems like there's no happy medium when it comes to origin stories. It's either too short
or too
too overdone, or it's exasperatingly too long and just exhaustive.
There have been 44 different origin movies for superheroes. I mean, ranging from the Powerpuff Girls, technically it's a superhero movie, all the way to do you know what the highest grossing superhero movie was for an origin story?
What?
Wonder Woman.
Which one? The newest one?
The newest one, yeah, the newest one. One that matters.
Well, that one's excellent. Have you seen it?
I have.
Did you not like it?
So I used to be a huge Chris Pine fan.
Yeah.
Like I like him as in Star Trek. I like him a lot in Star Trek. Mm-hmm. But I've got like Pine fatigue, Pine teague. And I feel like if I see him in one more stinking movie or TV show, I'm going to lose. He has like 3 things on Netflix right now. Like, I don't have time for Chris Pine.
Yeah, he is getting a little.
Give me some more Zachary
Quinto.
Or Quinto? Zachary Quinto?
Is he the guy that played Spock?
Yeah, he was also Sylar in Heroes.
Yeah,
I became a Zachary Quinto fan from Heroes.
I liked him in Heroes. He did fair as Spock, but I don't particularly like him as an actor. I don't think he's that good. I mean, he did a really good villain.
Wrong.
I just think that he's just limited. He's got a very Nicolas Cage-esque feel about him, where he feels kind of the same in every role that I've seen him in, which has only been the two. But no, I agree. I'm a fan of when we're talking about characters that played kind of a superhero role. He did a little bit of, I'll explain in a minute, but also were in other shows. Carl Urban. Carl Urban has played several kind of superhero-esque roles. For example, he played in Doom, which was a lot of fun. It was very trite at the end, but it was a lot of fun.
I loved the end was the best part with
The first-person shooter bit. I didn't like that part
because you're an idiot.
I liked the rest of the movie.
you probably also like third-person games, you doofus.
I do. I like to see my character acting.
No. All I want is my screen with my crosshairs, like a man.
Could you imagine
This is my rifle. This is my.
How awful like Spider-Man would be as a first-person game? You can't do that.
Why couldn't you?
Unless it's VR. Which, listen up, Sony.
Could you imagine?
That would be dope.
Have you seen the old ladies like doing the VR and they're like, ah, and they're like they're on the roller coaster and it's funny because they're old.
Have you seen the one where the people are like wearing the VR and then they walk off of I saw one of a kid and he was doing a tightrope thing, kind of like the guy that did tightrope between the two Twin Towers, and then he loses his balance and he falls and you see him literally like smash his face into the floor.
I've seen it.
It's hilarious.
Never seen it.
Anyway, but yeah, no, I could use a little more Carl Urban. He doesn't get quite enough big roles.
I think he gets plenty.
I think he's great. I think
he gets plenty. I think he's fine.
You're not a fan of Carl?
I think Carl Urban's fine. I
feel like
I think that there are a lot of actors that I think that we disagree on. Like I detest Matt Damon.
I'm not a fan of Matt Damon either.
No, you're not?
No.
Well, I think we agree on that. That's great.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
I do like Carl, and I think Carl is a little bit undervalued, and I think that RDJ is a little overvalued.
RDJ is not. First of all, how dare you?
Listen, RDJ is the perfect Iron Man, but they gave the wrong role. They assigned the wrong roles to the wrong actors when it came to Sherlock Holmes. Jude Law would have made a much better Sherlock.
I don't disagree with that, but they're playing off Iron Man.
Yeah, I mean they're playing off the success of Iron Man, and I get that. But Jude Law,
you take the hot actor while you can. Jude Law,
even
another
Paul
one of those.
Bettany would have made a better
Jude Law
Sherlock.
is another one of those actors that, as he's gotten older, he's taken some garbage movies.
Yeah,
what was the last good thing that Jude Law was in? What was that movie? Like what was that movie that just came out like a year ago that really flopped? Like that Mordecai or whatever it was. That's awful.
That wasn't Jude Law. That was Johnny Depp.
Same thing.
Wow.
Sorry, Jude. What was what was Jude Law? And what am I thinking of? I'm thinking of a movie that came out this past year.
Austin's opinion of your acting career is trash.
It's not trash.
Listen, Jude, we know you're listening to this podcast, and that song was for you. Anyway,
I'm trying to think of the last movie that I saw him in. I did like to tell him Miss Ripley. That was a solid movie.
He was in what was that one where they were taking back body parts from people?
Repo Man.
Repo Man.
That was
excellent.
Good.
Very graphic, but excellent
very
movie.
Graphic.
Not recommended for anybody to watch because it was a very violent, graphic movie, but it was an excellent storyline.
I don't know what I'm thinking of. I can't think of what I'm thinking of. I don't know. I just
he's not much of an A-list kind of guy.
He's not, and that's what
AI. He was an AI. That was an excellent movie
because I don't like Spielberg. We discussed this.
That's a fair point.
I'm not a Spielberg person.
That's one thing we are very divided.
We are very divided on your infatuation and my hatred of Steven Spielberg.
I wouldn't say I'm infatuated, but I understand.
I think you are.
So anyway, it gets back to our topic because we've derailed severely.
Really bad.
Origin stories. So there's a big difference between origin stories when it comes to television versus movies. And I think my opinion on it is that, if you're going to do an origin story, do it right. For example, one of the here's an example, right?
What's all right? For an example, what is the best origin story that you've seen?
The best origin story overall, I would say, I think the best origin story. It's hard to say because there are so many, right? Like we talked a little bit about this at the head of this podcast. One of my favorites, and this is going to be controversial to anybody who listens to, or likes this property, but one of my favorites is the origin story of the Ring of Power through the Lord of the Rings franchise, right? So you actually do have a snippet of the origin of it, where it was created, in the story about how it got to the hands of the character that then transmitted it onto the next person, who's the main character of the first
Thank you for
original
not spoiling
trilogy.
this for me. I'm going back through to watch all these movies.
You're watching them from my account, right? So you're watching the 5.5 hour long versions.
Yeah, I now so we did this before. That I've never really seen all these movies.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do my due diligence to watch them.
They're
But
so
David
good.
only has the extended director's cut.
That's
and
the only
it's
ones worth watching.
4.5 hours long.
The first one is 4 hours, just under 4 hours. The second is right at 4 hours. The third one is 4.5 hours long. You're talking a solid 12.5 hours
I think
of
they
Lord of the
work or
Rings.
something to watch these.
And that's just for that trilogy.
Yeah.
That's not including the
I know.
prequel trilogy of The Hobbit. And that's what I'm talking about, right? So you've got a little bit of this opening narrative in the first one that kind of shares a little bit of the story of where the ring came from and its creation and how it got into the hands of the one of the main protagonists that ends up passing it on to his nephew, and then the story begins, right? And that's cool. And that was a good 10, 12 minutes of story,
Right.
Maybe longer in the extended editions of backstory. That was an excellent use of time, and Peter Jackson is just a wonderful storyteller in that regard, right? And then you've got where they actually took that story, the story of, and it wasn't really, I guess it was the origin story of Bilbo, which is the uncle of the main character of the original trilogy. Then you get this entire trilogy on him. Now,
Right.
Pete, and much to the chagrin of many of the fans of the properties, he took several liberties with the Hobbit trilogy, none of which altered the storyline in any way. They did develop out characters that were never really there, or developed out characters that were not primary, and added characters that were never there, and love interest between characters that didn't exist in order to capitalize on the gains
Right.
and to make it into a trilogy, and so on and so forth. And I can't fault him for that, because it was a big success. Those movies were very well received and made them tons of money. But the thing is, I thought that was an excellent story, excellent origin story. Probably, in my opinion, one of the finest versions of it, because they already given a good 20 minutes, maybe up to a half hour worth of origin
Right.
that falls before that prequel trilogy. And then you got the prequel trilogy, and then you've got the remainder of the story, and it picks right up from there, and it's just excellently done. I think, personally, off the top of my head, that's one of the best. Now, I will say, even though it's not canon, because they went back and they actually did change details in the original timeline, creating an alternate timeline, I would say that the J.J. Abrams Star Trek trilogy that's kind of spawned from those movies and that kind of direction, I would say those are excellent as well. Origin stories, but also though they are different.
I think for me it's hard to beat. Like I think the Star Trek in the Darkness, when talking about Abrams Star Trek films,
one of the finest films I think
so
he's ever
good.
done.
So good. But so for me, when it comes to origin, my best and worst are kind of almost the same, because that Batman Begins, the way that was done.
Yeah, that was excellent.
But Christopher Nolan is a film genius.
He's a master storyteller.
He is, whether you're looking at the Batman movies or Inception or even something as old as like Memento. I recently watched Memento. It was phenomenal. It was so good.
It was a good
dark,
one.
twisted.
Did he do The Machinist too?
I don't remember.
Because that was an excellent story.
Machine was great.
Yeah.
But so like the way that Nolan did that origin story was phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree.
But my worst origin story is along the same lines, because, and I said it earlier, is Gotham.
Yeah.
Because they've taken these storylines that are as old as that that are
Tale
ages
as
old.
old as time.
Mr. Freeze was
Sublime.
so I quit watching.
Sorry, listeners.
I quit watching whenever they did Firefly and Mr. Freeze. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
And the whole
Because
plot thread that they threw in there with Barbara Gordon and all that junk is just
right. It's like, oh, she's crazy. It's like, no, she's not crazy. Barbara Gordon was a saint. How dare you? But I sit there and
Don't you talk about Barbara that way.
Not my Barbara.
You get your filthy mouth and quit
That's
talking
my
about Barbara.
Barb. But like I sit there and I have to watch these shows, and I'm fine with some creative liberty. But when you take 60 years of comics and 60 years of stories, and you say, you know what I'm going to take these all to the middle of this field. I'm going to shine them up real nice. I'm going to drop trow and take a big old dump over all the stories. Mm-hmm. That's where I have a problem.
Yeah,
and that's what Gotham has
basically
done.
what they've done with
Gotham has dumped on every single bit of Batman history. And I get it. This is not like, you know, some life or death thing. It's not really history, but it's history that I'm interested in.
And, you know, and the thing is I think they were, because I think that was originally a CW show, if I remember correctly.
Fox.
Oh, has it always been Fox?
Fox.
So the thing that I think is interesting is that they were trying to do a similar thing with what Smallville did. Mm-hmm. Smallville also did the same thing, and they definitely kind of took a proverbial dump on some of the storylines and some of the characters and stuff, but they didn't do it nearly as bad as Gotham.
No, Gotham was terrible.
And it's almost forgivable the way that they did it and some of the things that they did because it was just a well-done show.
Right.
Tom Welling was a great Clark Kent Superman. And in fact, whenever they first announced that they were rebooting the universe, the DC universe, and that they were going to create a new blockbuster feature film, me and my friends at the time were convinced that they were going to be rebooting that and actually tying the Smallville universe into it. They didn't. In fact, they didn't even tie it into the CW DC universe. It's completely standalone and completely forgotten.
I did like the Man of Steel origin story, though. I did too. I thought that was really well done.
There were several things about that film that I didn't like, but overall, I thought it was great.
I think people in general like to dump on the DCU
because it was in competition with Marvel.
Right. And I think that before that really it's more of a personal taste.
Yeah.
Marvel movies are a bit more light.
Yep.
And the DC movies are a bit dark. Now I will say this. While I had high hopes for the Justice League movie, there were parts of it. I mean, like, why Steppenwolf? I mean, like, really, like, why Steppenwolf?
And ultimately,
so many better villains to use.
And the biggest qualm, I think the biggest qualm with Steppenwolf wasn't even that he was the villain. It was that he wasn't nearly strong enough.
No.
Because Steppenwolf pretty much demolished just about everybody else.
Right.
But then they bring Superman back from the dead, and it's literally like, okay, snap, and he's done.
Right.
You know, he pulled a Thanos on that Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
He just literally snapped him out of existence.
And that's about, like, I've never hated that. I'm not much of a fan of Superman anyway. I think I always said Superman was probably my least favorite superhero.
He's a little bit of a cop-out for the universe, let's be honest.
It's like, oh, he's the best at everything.
But I actually really liked the film, but there are definite entries in that universe that are significantly better. Wonder Woman is a great example, and I did get the privilege of seeing a pre-screening of... have I told you this? I got to see a pre-screening of Aquaman.
Oh, you stink.
Fantastic.
Good. Speaking of superheroes, you've seen Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, right?
I have. Looks really good.
Mysterio looks great.
Tony's definitely dead.
I did joke at work that I wish that the Mysterio would have come out in like a Rey Mysterio mask from pro wrestling, like a luchador mask, and just been like, what did they say? He was like arriba de raza.
He's like, look at me in my stretchy pants.
But like, I always
that was
Nacho
kind of
Libre.
luchador.
That was Nacho Libre.
You're right.
Spider-Man Far From Home looks really good.
It does look great.
It's really good.
You know, and I've heard some negative feedback. Not to diverge too much, but I've heard some negative feedback on Jake Gyllenhaal as a villain. But I think
I thought Mysterio was a good guy.
I don't think he is. I think he's going to be a Deadpool-esque,
like an anti-hero,
like a reluctant hero.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's going to end up being. But I have heard some negative feedback about Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think Jake Gyllenhaal, in my opinion, like Leo DiCaprio and some of these other guys, that as they age, their roles take on significantly better acting chops. I think the same is the case for Jake Gyllenhaal. But speaking of origin stories, going back to our primary topic, and I think wrapping it up well, a great origin story, and you may disagree with me on this, and if you do, that's you're okay to be wrong. A great origin story that has been overdone, pretty much done over again at least 3 times in big blockbuster, significantly well-received films, is the origin story of Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't see much of the origin of Spider-Man in Spider-Man Homecoming. We did see a couple of snippets of it, but I think the Tobey Maguire origin is the best.
No.
But I think the Spider-Man Homecoming, like, casting and production is far superior than the rest.
I will say this, and I'm in the minority. I loved Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man.
I thought he was great. Here's the thing. Here's my opinion. I think we've talked about this before.
I also liked Emma Stone as Mary Jane. That's a whole other discussion.
She was Gwen Stacy.
Gwen Stacy, whatever.
Now here's my thoughts on all of the Peter Parkers
just great.
and Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire was by far the best Peter Parker. He had it in the bag. But Andrew Garfield was a far superior Spider-Man. But Tom Holland fits in there nicely in between. And he does have, I do appreciate their treatment of that character and writing him into the universe at such a young age and having an actor that can adequately act the age he's supposed to be because he actually is the age that they're writing him in there as, which I think is excellent. But no, you're right. Andrew Garfield was a great Spider-Man. He was a little bit too cool to be Peter Parker, though. His Peter Parker was a little too cool.
Andrew Garfield? Yeah.
He was a little too
My
together.
issue with Tobey Maguire was...
But you're right.
Spider-Man,
Emma Stone.
was Spider-Man 3? Spider-Man 3,
Yeah.
the dancing scene?
Yeah, the proverbial turd of the trilogy.
I just... Like, when I watched that, I'm just like, I don't know how anybody can watch this and think, like, you know who's a great actor? Tobey Maguire. He's phenomenal. I had a problem with the way that Tobey Maguire was dancing in that movie down the street.
Yeah.
And he was, like, winging the ladies, and they're like, oh, Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire.
Like, I just turned it off. Like, I'm just like,
My biggest issue with...
Because it didn't work for me. I'm like, you know what?
It wasn't great.
I'm going to get that, like, My Chemical Romance hairdo going on.
It did remind me a little bit. It did create a bit of a parallel in my mind later on whenever I watched the Ron Burgundy Anchorman, first one, when he's in the jazz club and he pulls the flute out of his sleeve.
But that was realistic.
That was hilarious.
Amazing.
That's what that reminds me of now. And I just think of it as a comedic thing.
I'll agree with that.
But my primary issue with Maguire's Spider-Man is actually in the first movie, and it's when every time he gets punched, he squeals like a little girl. It's just, it's bad. It's horrible. What?
Oh, my wife just said, can you guys find a stopping point to break so I can use the mixer to make cookies that's really loud? So I'm done officially because I'm getting cookies.
I think it's time. I think it's cookie time.
Cookie time? Cookie time.
Cookie time.